there be sound. I'm not generally the type to be strapped to a podium, so I'll probably be wandering the stage a little bit tonight. I want to thank all the partners for inviting me to come out to this event. Thank you to Jack for that enthusiastic introduction. And one of the reasons that this Stamp Out Stigma message is so very vitally important to me is, yes, I've written 6 books. Jack, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I'm a YouTube personality, and I travel the world speaking on topics related to mental health. I do a lot of high-level training. But I think the most important part of my resume is I'm a woman in long-term recovery from mental health and addiction both. I've been gratefully, by doing what I need to do, clean and sober for the last 16 years. And thank you. And I'm also in recovery from a form of depression that used to be called dysthymia, and I'm also in recovery from a condition called dissociative disorder. And I'll probably speak to that a little bit more later in the presentation. Suffice it to say, we still need events like Stamp Out Stigma, because every year I can tell you horror stories about being out in public and people being introduced to me by my titles and my credentials and sitting with me at a wedding or sitting with me in public events, and then I start hearing people who I'm at the table with saying things like, oh, we should just let the addicts die. They're a drain on society. Or, like Fern so eloquently expressed, using terminology like crazy and loony, that I think helps to promote stigma. And I also deal with another level of stigma, which is people in my own field, other professionals, who don't think it's necessarily great for those of us who are in recovery to talk about the fact that we're in personal recovery. There's still this kind of undercurrent, even in a lot of the helping professionals, that this is something that's very technical and clinical, and that treatment has to be so rigid and removed, and it doesn't. I think one of the greatest assets that we have as people who work in the field, and I know a lot of you out here tonight are in the field, is to be able to speak from the truth of our own story and our own experience. And so I just applaud all of you for bringing this event together, and I thank you for being here tonight, whatever your intention is for being here. So the focus of my workshop this evening is going to be a little different than what I spoke on this afternoon. I know some of you have double dipped, and I appreciate you for both. And I was delighted to be asked to teach on mindfulness, which is one of the approaches to health and healing that has gotten a lot of attention in recent years. So I'll speak to a little bit of that. From my own experience, I will say that learning to embrace mindfulness and learning to embrace a mindful path to my own recovery has absolutely been a game changer. Now, the thing on a mindfulness talk or a mindfulness workshop is I can stand up here for an hour and show you a PowerPoint and talk about it, but you're not going to learn a thing about mindfulness doing it that way. So I would like to be able to guide us through several different exercises tonight in mindfulness, whether you've practiced extensively or whether you're like, mindfulness, what's mindfulness? You're in the right place. We welcome anybody here tonight, wherever you may be at with the practice. So I will be leading us tonight through a little introductory segment on some of the classic practices of mindfulness. And all I ask is that you approach it with as reasonable as possible of an open mind and an open heart. If you've never done mindfulness before, this may be a little bit of a step outside of your comfort zone. Yet that is what we ask people to do every day who are coming in for treatment, who are coming in for health and healing, and to improve their own wellness path. There's this great saying, I'm sure it's been blasted out in 85 different memes on social media, that growth happens outside of your comfort zone. So I will maybe be asking some of you to do that tonight, but always know that you have the right to opt out of any of the practices that I'll be leading us through. If you're feeling unsafe at any point, best to your ability, simply stop following my directions. If you need to step out, I won't take offense. If you do step out, I just ask you make an unspoken deal with me that you come back at some point so that we can check in at the end of the evening and make sure that you feel in a good enough place to go. All right, so I will be introducing you to these handy dandy little bells. Use the microphone here. whenever you hear the bells ring 3 times, it will generally indicate a starting of our practice and then a conclusion of our specific practice. As I ring the bells 3 times to begin with, my invitation, my request to you is that you deeply tune into the sound. If for some reason you have hearing loss and the sound is not accessible to you, my invitation will be through the other senses that I guide us through the next few minutes, that you use whatever sense is available to you to really help arrive at the present moment. So I will ring the bells 3 times, and your only job at the start is to listen. So from your sitting position, I'll ask you to begin by taking a stretch. Just a stretch that feels nice and organic in your body. Think of a dog, a baby, a cat. When they first wake up, there's absolutely no shame in moving the body in whatever way the body needs moved. And this is your first practice really tonight in embodied mindfulness. And then from the sitting position, I'd like you to come into a posture that you can hold for the next several minutes. So you don't have to sit so straight up like I'm going to come around with a ruler and measure your back. If you need to use the back of your chair, that's great. If you want a little more challenge, you could maybe scoot to the forward of your chair so your back is not up against the back of the chair. And really think of the word awareness here. How can you sit in a position that for you helps you to feel nice and alert and aware, keeping your feet on the ground if that's possible for you. And let's start with our eyes open. And to begin, I'd like you to look around the room and notice what you see. Notice colors, notice shapes. Not obsessing or analyzing, just noticing that you are here and now, using your visual channel to help you. And now I'd like you to tune to your sense of sound or your sense of hearing and notice, once I stop talking, if there's a sound that's in your awareness right now. What are you hearing either inside the room or outside of the room? And let the sound alert you to the presence of the moment. Now I'll invite you to take a breath and notice if there's a smell that you're aware of right now. There may not be, it's okay. And then maybe swallow and notice if there's a taste in your mouth right now. I still have some remnants of peppermint in mine. And for touch or sensation, a couple options here. You can either touch or close. Maybe touch the chair that you're sitting on. And let yourself feel, let yourself tune into sensation. And now you have the option to either close your eyes or leave them open. Some people really like to close their eyes during mindfulness practice. It helps them to tune in. For some of us, that can feel a little claustrophobic, a little overwhelming. So keep your eyes open. Meditation does not work any better with your eyes closed, necessarily. It's what kind of works for you. And whether your eyes are closed or open, really attune now. Feel the sensation of your body sitting in the chair. And now I'd like you to notice your breath moving through your body. So this isn't deep breathing, at least not yet. We'll do a little of that in a bit. Just notice the natural flow of your breath. Notice the natural inhale, the natural exhale. Notice if there's a temperature, like is your breath cool, warm, neutral? How does your breath feel in your belly, in your chest? Is there even a sound? It's very subtle. Is there a sound that your breath makes? And after I stop talking, I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes here. And the task is simple, perhaps not easy. That's to stay present with the breath. If you need a little extra help, you can say this to yourself. As I breathe in, I know I'm breathing in. As I breathe out, I know I'm breathing out. Or if you like, just simply in, out. In, out. If your eyes are closed, let them gently blink open. If you'd like to take another one of those stretches, take a stretch. Speaking from personal experience, one of the greatest keys to improve mental health is to let yourself stretch like this many times a day. Because too often when we talk about self-care and taking care of ourselves, we think that means working frantically for 6 days and then maybe taking 1 day off, or maybe taking a few hours during 1 day off to do something like go to a yoga class or go to church. I'd say still do those things if you can. But a real key to longevity is to be able to do these small practices in different pockets throughout the day. So take a stretch, take that minute to give yourself a breath. So I'll ask you to notice what you're noticing now after that small mindfulness exercise we just did. And I want to be clear, there's no right or wrong answer I'm looking for. You may say, I hated that because I had to sit still for 2 to 3 minutes. It's a common response I get from clients and clinicians alike. And I usually say in response, that's okay. I've been meditating for quite a long time, and there's still days that I have a hard time sitting still. You may have felt like you were finally able to catch your breath, like you were finally able to maybe get a little bit of peace for the first time all day. All answers are fine. Because that's one of the misconceptions about mindfulness practice I want to clear up. That if you've heard about mindfulness or read about mindfulness, or you've seen the Time magazine cover with the perfect size 2 yoga model on the cover, and she has this great blissed out look on her face that says mindfulness, a lot of my clients see that and they'll say, that's not me. I'm never going to be able to be that calm. Nor do you have to be. That mindfulness is not necessarily a relaxation technique that's going to take you to this state of being blissed out all the time. Can mindfulness help you relax? Hopefully help you relax a little bit more? Sure. But the fundamental meaning of mindfulness is to be able to be present with whatever is. Think about that for a moment. To be able to breathe, to be able to be present with whatever is, good, bad, or indifferent. So if what you're noticing is a sense of rest and relaxation, can you be present with that? If what you're noticing is that this is really difficult for me to be able to sit with this hard emotion right now, that's also an important part of the healing process. That is a very important part of the healing process. So mindfulness as a word, my favorite definition of it is the practice of coming back to awareness. So what does that mean? If we think of mindfulness not just as awareness, not just as meditation, but if I say mindfulness is the practice of coming back to awareness, anybody, you can just kind of raise your hand and shout it out. What does that mean for you when you hear mindfulness is the practice of coming back to awareness?
Being present in the moment.
Yeah, being present in the moment. But if I say to come back to being present in the moment, what does that suggest? That we usually aren't. That our attention wanders and goes away. So whenever anybody tells me, a client, a patient, you may be saying it sitting out there tonight, I can't meditate, I can't sit still, my general response is congratulations. Neither can I most days. That sitting still is never really the end result, although as a room you did beautifully with it tonight. That the practice of mindfulness is in the coming back, constantly coming back. So if you tried a meditation like that and you said, Jamie, it didn't work, because my mind wandered 8 million times in the minute and a half. My answer to you would be, but did you notice that your mind was wandering 8 million times? And when you noticed it was wandering, were you able to bring it back? To take just that one breath. And if that's the case, you've just practiced mindfulness. And it's called a practice for a reason. Nobody ever becomes an expert at it right away. Just like mental health and recovery is not anything anybody ever gets right away. But it's through a series of engaging in small practices like this that we're hopefully able to get it. So I mentioned earlier that I have this condition called dissociative disorder. If you want a master class in how not to define dissociative disorder, watch any Hollywood movie on multiple personalities. So dissociation as a term simply means to sever. And in the old school, we used to call it multiple personality disorders. And the way that books wrote about it, the way that movies portrayed it, was that people with multiple personalities often have these very violent alters that can come out at a moment's notice. And the reality of the phenomenon of dissociation is that we all do it. It exists as a response to the trauma and stressors of life. So I'll give you an example. If you've never heard the term dissociation before, if you've heard it and you're not really sure what it means, like I said, the English definition of it would mean to sever. So what we're severing from is the present moment, from our awareness, from our reality of what is. So we all dissociate when we play on our phones. I don't mean checking on your phones for legitimate reasons, Jack. Just playing. But if you're...
I was going to go live and show you.
Okay, that's fair.
I was.
So there's a reason for that. But what I'm thinking of is if you're bored, if you're overwhelmed, if you're overtaxed, and your mind is telling you, I can't be here right now, going to the phone is a very classic way that most of us in modern times dissociate. If you've ever engaged in a Netflix binge, that's dissociation. If you've ever done even a very nice meditation, like a calm place or a happy place, where you just kind of let the mind drift and be somewhere else, that's dissociation. And the message is that dissociation is not a fundamentally bad thing, and it is something that we all do in human experience. The reality is that survivors of trauma, especially survivors of very early childhood trauma, often dissociate as a way of life. So if you ever have described yourself, or you would describe others as constantly being zoned out, checked out, not really present. When I was a kid, I was constantly told, Jamie, you look like you've been beamed in the head with a fastball. And that's because it just became a little too difficult to be present to all of the stress that was going on around me. And I believe I was born a very emotionally sensitive person, which I don't take as an insult today, even though it has often been hurled at me as an insult. That dissociation is really the brain's way of keeping us protected from a lot of these intensities that can come at us. And another part of dissociative disorder that is often misunderstood is the whole parts thing, the multiple personality thing. Now, I do not have dissociative identity disorder, which was formerly called multiple personality disorders, because I never have blanked out time. But I have existed from the time I was a young person with kind of a collection of internal parts that work within me and that fuel me at different times in my life and in different responses to stress. So for instance, even to this day, I identify as having a very active 4-year-old self, a very active 9-year-old self, a very active 19-year-old self. Oh, and trust me, it's a big risk to be up here as a professional at my level talking about this, because whenever people hear anything connected to parts, there's still that association of, oh, you're a multiple, you're crazy, the violent part is gonna come out at any time. But here's what I'd like to challenge you with. We all have parts. Have you ever referred to yourself before as having an inner child? Like this angsty little inner child that throws a tantrum when I don't get what I want. That's a part. Have you ever felt like when Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk and your anger gets tripped up and that part comes out of you? And you may even identify as having different roles in your life. I'm a different part, I'm a different person when I'm really in the active role of mother versus when I'm in the really active role of employee. We dissociate, we sever when we move into our different parts or our different roles. Folks with dissociative disorders, dissociative disorder unspecified was my diagnosis, dissociative identity disorder, we just do it a little bit more distinctly. So that so much of what healing and treatment has to look like for us is to develop a proactive strategy for learning how to get these parts of our experience that have resulted from legitimate trauma to be able to talk together more clearly, to be able to cooperate. So who you're seeing is Jamie. It's my adult self, and this is because of the result of a lot of therapy and a lot of healing and a lot of recovery over the years. But a lot of those parts that came about as a response to trauma are still within me. They're still part of my experience, and they need to be cared for just as much as my adult self needs to be cared for. And one of the ways I've done that is mindfulness practice, because so much of what dissociation is about for me is that whole idea of severing, leaving the present moment. And so much of what health and wellness is about is learning to exist in the present moment, no matter how, let me keep it real, no matter how much the present moment may suck, no matter how much the present moment may be distressing. I'm also in long-term recovery, I'm in a 12-step fellowship, and a saying that we love to toss around there is one day at a time, stay in the moment, just for today. They're good slogans, and they're good sayings, but it can become very difficult to do that unless you learn how to do that. And mindfulness practices, yoga practices, which have been part of the therapy that I've received over the years, have been absolutely vital for me to be standing up here before you today as somebody who is healthy, reasonably functional on most days, and fundamentally happy to be doing what I'm doing. So let's engage in another practice, because this is only a sampler tonight, And by the time the talk is over, I'm going to give you more ideas on how you can hopefully continue to work with the attitudes and the principles of mindfulness and learning to use them to your advantage for your own health and wellness. So if it's physically available to you, I'm going to ask you to stand up. If you can't stand for the next few minutes because of an injury or illness, you can adapt everything I'm going to do to the seat. All right, so see if we can spread out to create about a wingspan of length so you're not whacking your neighbor. And if you do, say hello to your neighbor. Hello. Hi, neighbor. Okay, so we did a sitting meditation. I'm now going to invite us into a standing meditation. So you can keep your eyes closed or open. Press down into your feet. And see if you can feel a line of extension from the crown of your feet all the way up to the top of your head. Like it's coming through the top of your head like a string. And try this with your breath. Just let yourself sway back and forth a little bit. And then eventually, coming into a place of stillness right in that middle sweet spot. Take a breath. Let it go. Take a breath. This time maybe let it go with a little bit of sound. Very nice. One more time, take a breath. And once more, make a sound of letting go. Beautiful. And from this place of standing stillness, notice whatever you notice. If what you're noticing is a deep sense of rest and relaxation, notice that. If what you're noticing is a sense of sadness, or even self-judgment, something we might describe as a little more negative, just notice that. And if what you're noticing is something more neutral, like it's not much of anything, notice that. Not trying to change it, but seeing if you can breathe with it. Inhale. Exhale. One more time, inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Notice whatever you notice. And from here, I'm going to invite you to stretch up. Take your arms overhead if that's physically available to you. If not, you can stretch the arms out. We're not going to be here forever, but maybe feel that extension now from the base of your feet all the way up through your fingertips. Stretch, engage. And now very slowly bring the arms down with breath. And notice the sensation of that. Take another breath. Let it go. And if there's anything still lingering now in your body, anything that might feel like you want to move it, take your hands. We call this flicking. Just start flicking it down to the ground. As if to further say, I release, I let go, of anything that might be stopping me from fully being in the moment. And then coming back to stillness. Bring the shoulders up to the ears. And this is the ultimate symbol for me of a stressed out position, right? Shoulders up by the ears. In trauma work, we might call this hypervigilance, always being on guard for something bad to happen, reacting to stress. Now with your breath, release the shoulders. And notice what happens to your shoulders immediately as you release. What's changed in your breath? What's changed in your body? Let's try it a couple more times, being curious about what we find. Bringing the shoulders up. I'm not going to keep you here forever, but I want to keep you here long enough for you to notice. What is it like when you hang on? What's happening to your breath? Now release, let it go. And what are you noticing? And once more, shoulders up by the ears. And now I'm going to invite you to freestyle it. Not just let it go, but maybe you want to take another stretch or a movement, move the shoulders around a little bit, maybe go side to side. This is actually a subtle practice we're doing now in what might be called mindful yoga or dancing mindfulness, which is responding to the needs of your body. And if your body's telling you it's time to sit down, let yourself sit down. But if your body's telling you, I need a few more movements, let yourself have the movements, and then eventually sit down. You're all a bunch of mindfulness pros in here. I love it. Just the fact that the whole room was willing to try that, awesome. And that's the real key to developing a mindfulness practice. Do you have a willingness to try? I want to share with you one of my favorite stories of my recovery. So I owe my life to my first recovery mentor, my first recovery sponsor, a wonderful woman from Kentucky named Janet Leff. And I met her when I was working in Croatia and Bosnia after the Civil War. Quick review of current events. There was a very bad civil war in the former Yugoslavia from 91 to 95. My family's Croatian, which is one of the reasons I was motivated to go there. Quite honestly, after my undergrad, it was part of my geographical cure because I was riddled with a bunch of addiction issues, and I thought, oh, if only I move away 8,000 miles, then maybe everything will be okay. Moving 8,000 miles didn't necessarily make it okay, but what did make it okay was that I met this wonderful woman named Janet. And the first recovery meeting I ever went to translate for her in 2001. And when I heard her talk about issues in recovery and I was translating them in Croatian, I said, wow, so much of this makes sense for me and for my family. And I started asking her questions, and she answered them with nothing but grace and dignity, never once trying to shun me or judge me. And I shared a little bit more on it this afternoon, that the most important piece of recovery advice she ever gave me, after hearing a lot of my litany about childhood trauma I had experienced and just all of my sad stories that made me feel very uncomfortable in the world, she said, Jamie, after everything you've been through, it's no wonder you became an alcoholic. So what are you going to do about it now? And I say that that recovery guidance saved my life because she validated me, yes, which I think is a vital, vital first step in helping people to get well. But then she never let me use it as an excuse. She never let me sit in it. It was always validate, what's the plan? Validate, what's the plan? And so one of the first suggestions she gave me was, because I was fortunate through a lot of my recovery journey, even though religious trauma was a big part of my story, that I never stopped believing in some kind of God or higher power, and it's up to you what you choose to believe. But I knew that sinking into that awareness would be helpful to me. And so she said, I recommend when you wake up every morning that you pray to the God of your understanding and ask help from that higher power to stay clean or sober today. And I said, I can't pray in the morning. I could barely get out of bed in the morning to go to work. At that time in my life, I was the anti-morning person. So literally, I told her, I roll out of bed, maybe get a shower, use the bathroom, and then I get to work. And she goes, oh, you use the bathroom. Isn't that interesting? And so she gave me a 24-hour book, which is a meditation book that's often used in 12-step programs. And she said, put this on your toilet seat. Because chances are, if you're going to use the bathroom in the morning, there's a pretty good chance you'll at least pick up that book. And maybe while you're sitting on the toilet doing your morning meditation, you'll actually pick up this book and do morning meditation. And there's that good old saying, I believe there's a lot of truth to this, that if you do something for 21 to 30 days, it becomes a habit. Keep doing it for 45 days, it becomes a lifestyle. And I was willing to follow her instruction, and this day, 17 years later, I have to read something every morning that is spiritual or enriching. I don't necessarily keep it on my toilet seat anymore, I keep it on my bedside, but it is so ingrained that I automatically do it. And that's really the fundamental message I want to leave you with, that no matter what you do, for a health practice, for a wellness practice, for a mindful practice, do it with consistency on a day-to-day basis, because that's how we bring about real change. You may go to one awesome meditation class a week, one great 12-step meeting a week, but if you do nothing for the rest of the 6 days, you're not doing your brain and your overall recovery much service. So if you're interested in starting a mindfulness practice, but sitting down and meditating or standing up and doing yoga and movement doesn't necessarily feel like it's something you can engage in right away, I would ask, what is something you do every day? Like go to the bathroom, brush your teeth. You want a real exercise in mindfulness, try mindful teeth brushing. Because I am a mindless toothbrusher. In that, I get it ready, I'm going, I'm checking my phone, I'm picking out my clothes, looking out the window to see what the weather's like. So one of the best ways to start a mindfulness practice is pick something, like brushing your teeth, and do it with full intention for 2 to 3 minutes. Maybe it's washing the dishes, maybe it's vacuuming. Pick something that you do in your day. And start with an intention. And intention is a word we use a lot in mindfulness. It just means a seed you're planting. When you plant a seed, you don't say grow. Do it. Okay, I'm a failure, I'm not growing. See, I can't meditate, I can't do that either. You plant the seed and you give the seed what it needs. Water, sunlight, daily attention. And from that seed grows something very beautiful. I think that's the key to developing mindfulness as a way of life. And speaking purely for me, that's the way to embrace a path of recovery, whether it be from addiction, mental illness, an eating disorder, self-injury, dissociation, whatever it may be. So I'd like to do one more practice, and then Tony and I thought it would be nice to open up the floor to a couple questions. Mostly if you have questions about technique or how to really cultivate and build a mindfulness practice. If you have any questions of me, personally, I will be hanging around at my table afterwards, and I'm certainly happy to visit with people. But I would like us to do one kind of concluding practice together that's really about sinking into the breath and using this breath to be able to really help us. We'll do part of it sitting, part of it standing, and then, like with everything, we'll notice what we notice. So closing your eyes or leaving them open, maybe bringing one hand to your stomach. Don't worry if what you find there is a shelf. I have a shelf. And as you inhale, let that belly, let that stomach expand. And as you exhale, make a sound if you want. Feel that belly, that core come back in. Inhale, expand, exhale, let it go. Try about 3 or 4 more at your own pace. If you like, you can pucker your mouth a little bit like you're blowing out through a straw. For some people, that option may help you to more fully relax. Inhale. And now notice whatever you're noticing. So now, on these next couple breaths, I'm going to invite us to get a little more demonstrative, if you will, in how we exhale. So one of my very good colleagues and friends, Amber, calls this the drama queen breath. She works with a lot of youth in her practice, and when she notices that the drama builds up, the invitation is, let's exhale the drama. So in whatever way works for you, take a nice deep inhale, and now as you exhale, maybe make a drama sign. Let it go. Try about 2 or 3 more like that. Inhale, exhale, make a sound, release the drama. 1 more, inhale, exhale, let it go. Very good. And 1 more time, inhale, exhale, let it go. Now let's stand up. Same idea here from that same basic stretch we did. To keep from hitting your neighbor, when I say arms up, bring them out in front of you and up instead of out to the side. So inhale, nice and deep, arms up. Exhale, let it go, make a sound if you like. Very good. 2 more like that. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And now come back to sitting, noticing whatever you notice. So my friends, our formal time is starting to transition. I only have about an hour and change with you tonight. If I had more time, this is what I would do with you. So I want to invite you as a follow-up to the workshop to visit at any time a free resources website that I keep called traumamadesimple.com. I have some cards on the back table that you're welcome to take that has both my business on the front and then this Trauma Made Simple on the back. Everything that I have done for free online is here. And one of the sections I'm most proud of is this Mindful Living Coping Skills section, where there's about 20 different videos, they all link to YouTube, where you can review, I don't know, about 10 more breath strategies, other than the ones that I taught you tonight. We have trauma-informed versions of some of the more basic yoga poses. And all the articles that I've done through various blogging outlets on trauma, on mindfulness, on recovery, are linked here. So especially if you work with folks or you're in the position where you can't afford a book, but you do have internet access, that's one of the reasons that I set this site up. So please feel free to use it and use it freely after the workshop. So Tony agreed to be my Phil Donahue for the evening. Dated reference for you younger folks in the audience. And we wanted to open up the floor just for the next about 10 minutes or so. And as Tony would ask, just to keep your comments or questions brief in the service of time. So anybody who has a question can ask a question. So the floor is open with that.
Is this something better done alone, with your partner, in a group? Does it matter?
It's a good question. I would say whatever format is going to get you into a consistent practice, then to go ahead and do that. I think where group can help is it gives you accountability to start with. So speaking purely for myself, even though I have a personal yoga and meditation practice that I do every day, I still go to groups, I still go to classes. Because I learned something from different teachers. And I do think there can be an energy and a connection. I mean, just think of how did it feel doing this in a group tonight? Even though you didn't necessarily know the people who were sitting next to you, just the fact that we were all here for the same intention can certainly help. But if you're in a place where doing anything in a group signals dread and terror right now, but you do have a willingness to go online or get a book and try some of these things individually, I would say do that. So my short answer is both. Good question. Got a couple rousing hands go up over here. Love it.
I hope you didn't already say this, but can anyone practice any mindfulness technique and make it work? Or?
I believe any mindfulness technique can be adapted. So part of what I mean by adaptation is the option that I gave you, for instance, to close eyes or leave them open. Because for instance, a lot of folks with very high anxiety, if you ask them to sit still for 10 minutes with eyes closed and just be present with the breath, it can actually be more anxiety provoking than restful or relaxing. So part of the way that I teach, and I hope that was something I modeled tonight and is definitely modeled on the videos, is that there's always an option. If a client or a student or someone in the community says, I can't breathe, I bet you can. It's just finding the right breath strategy that will help you. So yes, I do think anyone can practice mindfulness because we're born mindful beings. If you want to see the ultimate mindfulness practitioner, watch a baby. They breathe with their full belly. They move the body in the way the body needs to be moved. And they're not afraid to express their emotion, however it may be in the present moment. And a lot of what I believe mindfulness brings us to is some of those best qualities of what it means to be mindful in that very pure state. Thank you, good question. Alex.
Hi.
Hi.
I work with a lot of children like under the age of 10. So I was wondering if some of these techniques can be modified for kids or...
Yeah. Good question. The thing with modification for young folks is time is always a modification. So where we were in an exercise for maybe 2-3 minutes, you can modify it more to 30 seconds. I also think movement-based mindfulness is very good with kids. So what we did with the stretching, the hand stretching, using a lot of that same mindful language. Another big part of what I do in my practice is expressive arts therapy. So using coloring and painting and making music. All of those practices can be engaged in mindfully. Something I have up here with me, I think all of us know the good old standard issue stress ball, right? This is one of my new favorite ones. You can even engage in the practice of squeezing the hell out of the stress ball as mindfully as possible. If we understand that mindfulness is being completely connected to what we're doing, and if we notice the head wandering away from attention, we bring it back to whatever it is we're doing in the moment. Yeah. Anyone else?
How long has the term mindfulness been around?
Yeah.
I just heard about this maybe 1 year ago, and I thought, what's this?
Yeah, very good. So the English word mindfulness, I warn you, I can wax on for hours about this, so I'll give you a short answer. So the English word mindfulness as a meditation technique was first coined in 1881 by an English monk who was studying with monks in the East. And mindfulness does have origins in a lot of Eastern cultures. There's a Sanskrit word, a Chinese word, and a Pali language word that equate with mindfulness. So it was this monk who was studying in the East that first coined the term mindfulness as this practice of coming back to awareness. Now, I will say mindfulness has gotten increased attention in the last 10 years specifically. Even if you look at peer-reviewed literature, every year it's exponentially growing how much interest there is in the practice of mindfulness. I referenced the Time magazine cover as part of the evidence for mindfulness going mainstream, mindfulness having more of a household tone to it. So not surprising that you may have only heard of it in the last couple years, but it has been around for quite some time. And it's not necessarily unique to Buddhist or Eastern cultures. A lot of my early spiritual study was in contemplative monastic Christianity. And any of you who come from a Catholic or Christian background likely know of Saint Benedict. And the rule of Saint Benedict is always we begin again, which means whenever your attention wanders, you can always start over again. And I think that's a really beautiful message for recovery as well. Always we can begin again. Thank you. In the back.
I think I can be loud enough.
Yeah, you're loud. I like it.
I work with a lot of geriatric patients,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just wondering if you had any techniques to help get them focused, especially the ones that maybe have dementia or Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
to kind of help with the relaxation and the anxiety.
Another good body of literature also shows movement. Granted, you might not have the same range of motion or the same range of movement available as if you're working with younger folks, but even doing, and it's even if somebody is bed confined, but they have arm capacity to be able to lift the arms up slightly and just reaching back and forth, almost like they're climbing a ladder with that mindful intent. And I would also say playing music from their generation has been shown to be incredibly helpful, and encouraging either mindful listening with that or connecting some of the mindful movement with music that they can connect to. Thank you. Over here.
How do you like override, say, your physical impairments? Like as I'm stretching out, one rotator cuff, that grabbed me, and then my knee grabbed me. So how do you override that kind of stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it is noticing what is called the edge and then backing off just before you get to it, because not moving is not helpful either when it comes to physical issues. So part of it goes to what I said earlier, that you can always modify. So if you can't do a full stretch, stretch to your capacity. You might recall in that one stretch I said you can reach up, or if that feels a little too much, you can reach out. The other thing I recommend is a deepened breath practice, because whenever you're noticing pain or ill sensation anywhere, if you can learn to, because so much of our tendency is to hold the breath, is to suck it in. And a lot of that is cultural messaging, as evidenced by the good old pick yourself up by the bootstraps, tough it up, suck it in. I was told suck it in so much. When actually breathing into it is the way we not only deal with difficult emotion, but perhaps difficult pain as well. And another technique that's used in chronic pain mindfulness quite a bit is, let's say if you notice a rotator cuff, you back off from it, but then can you draw your awareness to one other part of your body that does not have pain, even if it's your little pinky, and see if you can move your complete attention and awareness to that part where there's either no pain or neutral. Thank you, good question. All right, so Jack, I think you are coming up for a few concluding words.
Are there any more questions?
If there are, if you'd want to ask more privately, I will be at the back table after the workshop. I do have a couple of my books still back there. If you want to take a peek at them, please come and take resource cards, pens, and I have an email list if you wish to sign up for it. I want to thank you so much for your willingness. I think any mindfulness teacher's worst fear is we come up here, talk about these techniques we love so much, and nobody wants to do them, which is fine. That'd be your choice if that was your choice. I will say, though, that the willingness to try really is where recovery and wellness begins. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Jack.